still remember my first year at Hogwarts like it was yesterday. It was the year I found out I was a wizard, met my best friends, and, well, faced things I never could have imagined. Let me tell you about the top 10 moments that made that year so unforgettable. At number 10, we have the moment that changed everything for me, when Hagrid showed up and told me I was a wizard. I'd spent my whole life up to that point living under the stairs at the Dursleys, treated like I didn't belong. But then Hagrid came crashing in literally and said those words, "You're a wizard, Harry." I didn't believe it at first, but when he handed me my Hogwarts letter and told me about my parents, it was like my whole life finally made sense.
A moment of profound significance, Harry. Hagrid has a way of delivering life-altering news with a certain flair. And of course, the pig's tail was a nice touch.
Yeah, Dudley deserved that one. But what really stuck with me was realizing I wasn't just some nobody. I had a place in this world, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Coming in at number 9 is my first trip to Diagon Alley. After years of living in the dull, grey world of Privet Drive, stepping into Diagon Alley was like walking into a dream. Hagrid tapped those bricks with his umbrella, and suddenly, there it was. A whole world I never knew existed. The shops, the people, the magic. It was overwhelming in the best way. The most unforgettable part was visiting Ollivander. Mr. Ollivander said, "The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter," and I didn't really understand what he meant until I held mine for the first time. It was like it was a part of me. I didn't realize it at the time, but that wand was the first hint of how tied my life was to Voldemort. But back then it just felt like I'd finally found something that was truly mine.
Ah, Ollivander's, a place of great power and mystery. The wand that chooses you often reveals more about your destiny than you might expect. Yours, Harry, was particularly special. A phoenix feather core from Fawkes, shared only by one other.
Yeah, I didn't know it then, but that wand was the start of everything, and Diagon Alley was just the beginning. There were so many more moments that year that I'll never forget. At number 8, I'd have to say it's the first time I crossed the lake and saw Hogwarts. I'd never seen anything like it. The castle was huge, lit up against the night sky, and I remember thinking, this is where I belong. It was the first time I felt like I had a home.
Hogwarts has a way of welcoming those who need it most. I remember watching you that night, Harry. You had the look of someone who had finally found their place in the world.
I did, and it only got better from there. I'll never forget how nervous I was, standing there in the great hall with everyone watching, the candles floating overhead, the whispers, the anticipation. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And then there was the sorting hat, this old, tattered thing that looked like it had been around since Hogwarts was founded. When it was my turn, I sat on that stool, and the moment the hat was placed on my head, I heard its voice in my mind. It was strange, but also kind of comforting.
The sorting hat has a way of seeing into the hearts and minds of those it sorts. It's a moment of truth, Harry, for every student who passes through these halls. And for you, it was particularly significant.
Yeah, it was. The hat kept saying things like, "Plenty of courage, not a bad mind either," and then it mentioned Slytherin. I panicked a bit. I didn't want to go to Slytherin. I'd heard enough about it from Hagrid and Draco Malfoy to know it wasn't where I wanted to be, so I just kept thinking, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. And then finally it shouted, "Gryffindor!" The whole hall erupted, and I felt this huge wave of relief. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere.
A wise choice, Harry. The hat takes our desires into account after all, and Gryffindor was where you were meant to be.
At number 7, I'd say it's the first time I ever flew on a broomstick. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment changed everything for me. We were all out on the grounds for our first flying lesson with Madam Hooch. Most of the class was struggling to get their brooms to even lift off the ground, but when I called mine, it just jumped into my hand. It felt right, like it was meant to be there. Then, of course, Malfoy had to go and ruin it by snatching Neville's Remembrall. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't just stand there and let him get away with it. I got on my broom and went after him. I'd never flown before, but it felt natural, like I'd been doing it my whole life. When I caught the Remembrall, I felt this rush of excitement I'd never felt before. For the first time, I was good at something, really good.
Ah, yes. Flying is a rare gift, Harry, and you, like your father before you, had it in abundance. It was no surprise to me when Professor McGonagall brought you to meet Oliver Wood that day. She saw what I had expected, that you were destined for greatness on the Quidditch pitch.
I didn't know it at the time, but that moment was the start of something huge. Quidditch became such a big part of my life at Hogwarts, but back then, it was just about the thrill of flying, of feeling free for the first time in my life. At number 6, I'd have to say it's the Troll in the Dungeon. I know it sounds mad, but that night was actually one of the most important nights of my life. It all started during the Halloween feast. Professor Quirrell came running in, shouting about a troll in the dungeon, and the whole hall erupted into chaos. Everyone was being herded back to their dormitories, but Ron and I realized Hermione didn't know about the troll. She'd been in the girls' bathroom all evening, upset after one of Ron's comments earlier that day. We couldn't just leave her there, so we went to warn her. When we found her, the troll was already in the bathroom, and it was was, well, terrifying. But we didn't have time to think. Ron and I just acted. I distracted the troll while Ron tried to remember a spell, any spell, and then he did it. Wingardium Leviosa! He levitated the troll's club right out of its hands, and it came crashing down on its head. I've never seen Hermione look so shocked, or so grateful.
A moment of true bravery, Harry, and not just from you and Ron, but from Hermione as well. It takes courage to face danger, but it also takes courage to accept help when it's offered. That night marked the beginning of a friendship that would shape the course of your lives, and indeed, the fate of the Wizarding world.
Yeah, it's funny how things work out. Before that night, Hermione was just the girl who always had her hand up in class, and Ron and I were, well, just two blokes trying to figure things out. But after that, we were a team. The troll brought us together in a way nothing else could have. At number 5, I'd say it's the Mirror of Eris. I still think about that mirror sometimes. I found it one night when I was wandering the castle, trying to avoid Filch. It was just sitting there in an empty room. This huge, ornate mirror with an inscription at the top. Took me a while to realize it was a riddle. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. When I looked into it, I saw them, my mom and dad. They were standing right behind me, smiling like they were proud of me. I'd never seen them before, not really. The Dursleys didn't have any photos of them, and I'd only ever imagined what they looked like. But there they were, real as anything. I couldn't look away. I went back night after night just to see them again.
The Mirror of Eris is a powerful and dangerous object, Harry. It shows us what we most desire, but it does not give us truth or knowledge. It can trap us in dreams if we let it. I remember finding you there, night after night, and I knew I had to warn you. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Those words were as much for you as they were for myself.
I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do. The mirror showed me what I wanted most, but it couldn't give me what I needed. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. Still, I'll never forget that first moment, seeing my parents. It was like a part of me that had always been missing was finally there, even if it was just for a little while.
And that, Harry, is the bittersweet nature of the Mirror of Erised. It reminds us of what we've lost, but it also reminds us of what we must strive for, not in dreams, but in life.
Yeah, it's funny though. Even after all these years, I still wonder what I'd see if I looked into it now.
Perhaps one day you'll find out, but I hope by then you'll have no need for it.
At number 4, I'd have to say it's the Giant Wizard's chess game. I still get chills thinking about it. We'd already made it past the Devil's Snare and the Flying Keys, but nothing could have prepared us for that chessboard. The pieces were massive, towering over us like stone giants. And the moment we stepped onto the board, it was clear this wasn't just a game, it was a battle. Ron took charge straight away. He's always been brilliant at chess, but this was different. He was calm, focused, and completely in control. He told us where to stand, how to move, and when to attack. It was like watching a general lead his troops into battle. But then he realized what he had to do to win. He had to sacrifice himself.
A moment of true bravery, Harry. Ron's willingness to put himself in harm's way for the greater good was a testament to his character. It's easy to overlook the quiet courage of those who stand beside us, but that night, Ron proved himself to be every bit the hero.
Yeah, he did. When he said, "That's chess," and stepped forward to let the Queen take him, I felt this mix of pride and panic. I didn't want to leave him there, but we had to keep going. It was one of the hardest moments of that year, but it showed me just how much Ron was willing to risk for us. For me, I'll never forget that. At number 3, it's got to be the first time we met Fluffy. I know it sounds mad, but that 3-headed dog was one of the most terrifying and fascinating things I'd ever seen. We'd been warned to stay away from the 3rd-floor corridor, but of course, we didn't listen. Curiosity always gets the better of us. The whole place was dark and eerie, and when we pushed open that door and saw Fluffy for the first time, well, let's just say I've never been more glad that Hagrid's obsessed with dangerous creatures. Fluffy was massive, with 3 heads snarling and snapping at us. I thought we were done for.
Ah, yes, Fluffy. A rather unique guardian, wouldn't you say? Hagrid's fondness for the extraordinary often led to interesting choices, but Fluffy served his purpose well. He was the first line of defense in protecting something of great importance.
That's what got me thinking. Why would a school have a 3-headed dog guarding a trapdoor? It didn't make sense at the time, but it was the first clue that something big was going on. We didn't know it then, but that moment set us on the path to everything that came after. The stone, Quirrell, and, well, Lord Voldemort.
Curiosity, Harry, is a powerful thing. It can lead us into danger, but it can also lead us to the truth. That night, you and your friends took the first step toward uncovering a plot that threatened not just Hogwarts, but the entire Wizarding world.
At number 2, I'd have to say it's the moment I faced Quirrell in the final chamber. I'll never forget stepping into that room, expecting to find Snape, and instead seeing him, Quirrell. The way he turned around, calm and confident, not stuttering or nervous like he always was in class, it sent a chill down my spine. And then he unwrapped his turban, and I saw him, Voldemort, his face on the back of Quirrell's head, pale and twisted, like something out of a nightmare. Voldemort started talking, trying to convince me to hand over the stone. He said things like, "There is no good and evil, only power, and those too weak to seek it." But I knew better. I'd seen what power like that could do, what it had done to my parents. And then Quirrell tried to grab me, but he couldn't. His hands burned, blistered, just from touching me. That's when I realized it was my mum. Her love, her sacrifice, was still protecting me.
The power of love, Harry, is the most ancient and mysterious magic of all. It leaves a mark, not a scar, but something far more powerful. Your mother's love was your shield that night, and it always will be.
It was the first time I really understood what you meant when you said love was my greatest strength. I fought Quirrell as hard as I could, but it wasn't easy. I was just a kid, and he had Voldemort on his side. When I woke up in the hospital wing, I was relieved, but I also knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. And finally, at number 1, it's got to be leaving Hogwarts on the Hogwarts Express. That moment, standing on the platform with Ron and Hermione, felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. We'd been through so much together. Trolls, chess games, three-headed dogs, and even Voldemort. And now, here we were, heading home, but not the same as when we'd arrived. I remember looking out the window as the train pulled away, watching the castle disappear in the distance. It felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind, but I also knew I'd be back. Hogwarts was my home now, and Ron and Hermione were my family. We laughed, we joked, and we talked about everything that had happened. It was perfect. As the train rolled on, I couldn't help but feel excited for what was coming next. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference.
A fitting end to your first year, Harry, and a reminder that no matter where life takes you, the magic of Hogwarts and the bonds you've formed here will always be with you.
Yeah, always.
Wait, the Daily Prophet is actually good. I should subscribe right now for more.